I'm Benjamin Hall, and I'm searching for heroes. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I want to wish everyone a happy Memorial Day, but I also want to acknowledge how hard this day can be for the countless people and families who have lost loved ones who are serving our country. And today, as we honor those men and those women who sacrificed everything, I'm so grateful to have Bonnie Carroll on the podcast with me. In 1992, Bonnie's husband, Brigadier General Tom Carroll, died in a tragic army plane crash that claimed the lives of 8 soldiers, leaving Bonnie absolutely devastated. In the aftermath of unimaginable grief, Bonnie chose to transform her loss into something profoundly meaningful, something that would honor Tom and also help others who were going through a similar loss. That's how the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivor, also known as TAPS, was born. It is a lifeline of care, of support, and it's made for those grieving the death of a military loved one. Today, Bonnie and I talk about the mission of TAPS and how she's actively seen the power that community holds when it comes to healing. We also discuss why, especially on Memorial Day, it is important to slow down and honor someone who laid down their life for our freedom. And in the words of Bonnie, always say a name and don't forget them. I hope you enjoy the episode. I wonder if it's okay, Bonnie, to start with, if you might take us back to that moment that changed your life. What was the beginning of your journey? And then I suppose, how did that lead to founding TAPS?
Yes, well, I had a career in government. I was fortunate to work in 3 different administrations in the White House and met the most extraordinary man, colonel in the Army National Guard. And we fell in love. I moved then to Alaska to join him. We had an absolutely incredible life together. And I just thought, it absolutely can't get any better than this. And then in November of 1992, very tragically, my husband and 7 other soldiers were killed in an Army plane crash. That was into the mountains of Alaska. And, there was a brief moment, because I had worked in government. I was actually a reserve military officer myself. And I thought, okay, I've had training. I've seen how the government works. I've seen how other organizations support people who have experienced trauma. We're going to get through this. And, I'm going to help everybody and my family will be okay. And, that little fantasy lasted about 30 seconds and I just couldn't breathe. And life stopped. And it took weeks and months looking for those kind of support organizations I knew had to exist. They didn't exist. So that was the beginning of the journey. And for 2 years, I talked with other survivors, with the government, with the military, with other organizations, caring for those who had experienced traumatic loss. And out of that came very specific gaps in services and programs. And there were needs that absolutely had to be met. So in November of 1994, now 31 years ago, TAPS was launched to be that home, that place of safety and sanctuary for the families of our nation's fallen heroes, to come together, to find the resources, the care, the support that they need to move forward with their lives as they honor their loved ones.
Is it the services you offer, are they across the board? So is part of it sort of looks at helping mental health, part of it looks at finances? I mean, it's a multifaceted approach, presumably, because when you suffer such tragic loss, you are affected by all of those, not emotional loss. It can also sadly be very physical loss. And I guess it's also helping people, look ahead and figure their lives out in that sense.
Absolutely. And that was very important in this needs assessment and gap analysis, because we found that, of course, that emotional support was critical for this devastating loss. But grief is not a mental illness. It is. I wish it was that simple. I wish we could put a bandage on or take a pill and resolve it, but it doesn't work like that. We only grieve because we love. So grief is far more a broken heart. And the one thing that we can do to bring comfort is to be with others who can understand our loss, who can walk beside us, to normalize and validate the experience that we've had, to let us know that we're not alone. So a big part of what TAPS does is bring families together. We have a peer mentor program where we train those a little further along in their loss for those newly bereaved, to let them know that they will have someone who understands in a safe space where they can speak with authenticity and without judgment. We also found casework assistance, as you said, was critical to understand not only those government benefits, but also all of the resources that are available to the families of America's fallen. You know, the military does a magnificent job of rendering final honors, providing a final resting place, and administering benefits to those who are eligible. But then really, they partner now with TAPS to open the aperture and be present for all who are grieving that loss. All family members, friends, everyone whose heart is broken because of the loss of this life. We have casework assistance. We have a 24/7 helpline. We've got connections to care in local communities. We have events all over America. We even have a sports program that allows families to honor their heroes on the field. So many ways that now we have hundreds of thousands of surviving families across America who are part of this community, honoring loved ones and healing that broken heart.
That's exactly what it is. It's a community. You know, I know that myself. I've seen how much that can help you get through difficult moments is when people come around you and support you. I'm sure you've learned a lot also about resilience, you know, what resilience looks like. And when you look, God, I can only imagine how many different people you've spoken to who have gone through this difficult journey. But what does resilience look like in your eyes? Like when you talk to these people, what do you say to them when they're going through something difficult? Do you say that on the other side, if we keep working together as a community, it will get better? Do you say you have to understand your loss before it gets better? Like how do you talk about resilience and talk to people who are going through this difficult moment?
Oh, what a beautiful question. And, you know, for now 31 years, we've done a tremendous amount of research. And a lot of people actually think there aren't many families coming into TAPS now. But right now we're seeing 3 times the number that we saw at the height of the wars. This past year, we had around 10,000 newly bereaved military and veteran survivors who came to us for care. We've done research, talking with survivors about their journey, and we found it doesn't work in stages. You know, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work on hospice really doesn't apply to mourning the death of a loved one. So our research, which we published on, shows that the first phase of this experience is safety and stabilization. It's just knowing that you're going to be okay, you know, stabilizing finances and home and just that day-to-day existence. So that's where we come into a family's life. You know, it's extraordinary that our bodies, our minds have a way to shield us from the full impact of the loss, maybe for even weeks or months. You know, it was about 6 months after my husband was killed that I came home and just fell to my knees and sobbed because for the first time I realized I would never see him again. I don't know. I think that'll make sense to those of your listeners who are bereaved. But when we work with families now, you know, in that part of their grief journey, we try to shift it from the pain of the loss to the gratitude for the life. So many people say that we have to have closure or we have to say goodbye. We never stop loving that person. That love lives on. You know, if we did have that moment, you know, many of our loved ones in the military die in circumstances away from us. Oh, you never had the chance to say goodbye. But if we did, if we were right with them, holding on to them, we would not have said goodbye. We would have said, I love you. And at TAPS, that's the place in which we live. It's a place of love and honor and remembrance and gratitude for these lives lived in service to this country.
I suppose that if you were able to speak to those who have departed us, they would want you to live your life to the best, helping others and enjoying it. They wouldn't want you living in sadness. And maybe that's what you imagined, that the best way to serve their lives is to make sure you don't waste the rest of yours.
That's beautiful. And, we talk a lot about our loved ones still being present in our lives and inspiring us. And I even do a workshop at our National Military Survivor Seminar about God winks, we call them. Ways that our loved ones come forward and present in our lives. And maybe it's a rainbow or a butterfly or finding a penny or a feather, but for our loved ones, there are some extraordinary signs that our loved ones are still very much around us. And that brings tremendous comfort.
I suppose you've spent years leading an organization that it's rooted in heartbreak in many senses. How do you then protect your own emotional health? Because you're on this ride yourself, and it must be some really difficult moments and some moments where you understand the good you've been doing. But that must be a difficult ride for you in your own personal life.
Oh, it really is actually such a blessing to just be able to share these incredible stories. At TAPS, we wear photo buttons. We have pictures of all of our fallen heroes. We remember lives lived. We consider our families the living legacies of service and sacrifice. And it is so inspiring and so, such a blessing to have this incredible opportunity to come into the lives of those who've experienced such tragedy and bring them comfort, honor their loved ones, get to know them, and get to embrace this experience and walk alongside them. Alan Walfeld wrote about the difference between counseling and companioning. And at TAPS, we companion those. We come alongside them in their grief. And one of the ways he talks about that is journeying to the wilderness of the soul with another human being, but not thinking we are responsible for finding the way out. We can't fix what is broken. I wish we could. And I say to many survivors, just, I wish that I could bring your loved one back. But what we can do is we can give you coping skills. We can give you an organization. We can give you a family who will embrace you and love you and hang on to you through these tough times. That's why our 24/7 helpline is so important. It's staffed by amazing peer professionals who are there around the clock to help our families who may not think they can make it till dawn. But it's a family built on love, and that truly fills my heart and soul every day.
More of our conversation right after this. People often reach out after the podcast, and if they've been going through something that's difficult, they say, I listened to your guest talk and it really gave me an extra boost. It gave me momentum. You must speak to some people who are finding it hard to turn the corner, to start embracing life. What, you've got the 24/7 lines that they can call. What would you say? What would you say to someone who is having a really difficult time recovering, getting over the grief? Is there a sort of specific thing that you try to point out?
Well, I can tell you at the depths of my own grief and my darkest times very early on, I was telling this very wise woman, just the pain that I was in. I didn't think I could just even endure this, and going on and on. And she looked at me and she said, well, knowing how much this hurts and how awful this is and how she said, would you rather never have met? And that was, oh my gosh. I just said, oh my, no, I treasure every moment. There just should have been more moments. And that was the shift from the pain of the death to the gratitude of what we had. None of us are here forever. We're all here in this experience temporarily. And thank God I met this incredible man who gave me so many gifts of love and life and laughter. And, so we often talk about that. For parents, thank God we had this child for the time that we did. We even have a little prayer that a child gave to us years ago. And it was so simple. And she just said, thanks, God, for the little while.
Mm.
How profound.
Wow. TAPS offers an incredible community of people. But when you look at sort of the national level outside of TAPS, are there any specific changes that you really think need to happen? TAPS is obviously filling a gap that doesn't exist elsewhere. Do you think more needs to be done outside of TAPS? Do you think the system itself needs some kind of change?
We do an awful lot of research that we have published, and our models of supporting the bereaved have actually been replicated for the civilian population, particularly our work with suicide postvention, which is caring for those impacted after the death of a loved one to suicide, and the insights of our surviving families of suicide loss. We now have over 30,000 family members who are part of TAPS who have experienced that complicated loss, are now providing insights on prevention efforts. But it's empowering our survivors to be that voice, to give meaning and purpose to the lives of those they love, and transform how we can help newly bereaved cope with the loss. We have partnerships now in 56 countries around the world. We created a global federation of organizations caring for the families of military and conflict deceased. So this really is now a global community. It's full of love and honor and remembrance in some of the darkest places.
And I know that there is a TAPS Ukraine, which of course you're a senior advisor to. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that's going on in Ukraine? And also, I suppose, are there any differences when you take TAPS to another culture, another part of the world? Or do you find grief the same? Is it the way you get through grief the same? Is resilience the same when it's on the other side of the world?
Absolutely. We all love and we all grieve. I served a year in Baghdad, Iraq, back in 2003 and 2004. And while I was there, I met grieving widows of the Iraqi army and found it was such an epiphany that they were grieving their losses exactly as we were. So I started connecting them with the American widows. And in the midst of this war and all of this pain and this grief and the losses that were happening, these women could come together and find peace and comfort with each other, to know that they were on this same journey and grieving these losses. And it brought humanity to the conflict. After the 2014 war in Iraq, when Russia invaded Crimea and Donetsk, the U.S. State Department came to us and asked if we would support mentoring a organization in Ukraine similar to TAPS that would care for all those who were lost in those wars. And of course, we leaned into that. We had meetings. Delegation came from Ukraine. Then we went to Ukraine. And now I've been there countless times doing training, building an organization. And it's extraordinary what they have been able to do now since February of 2022 to bring not only their community of bereaved together, to expand that to their entire society. We have a huge center in Dnipro on the front lines of Ukraine. They do children's camps. They actually are very involved in planning funerals and honoring the fallen and running the morgues and rallying volunteers to support their mission and the mission of those who are defending their freedom. So it's absolutely beautiful. I spent Christmas there in Ukraine with our team, and to see the love that they have for each other and the hope for peace was beautiful.
You talk about children's camps, and I just wonder, how a child gets through loss in a different way to perhaps an adult gets through loss. And presumably, I know you have programs that help children get through loss. How do you help a child get through this level of loss?
Oh, we have, at our Good Grief camps, we recruit military mentors, volunteers who we train to be one-on-one with a child, to just be a friend who will listen and give them undivided attention in a safe space. But children are so wise. They understand far more than we give them credit for. And, I had a little boy, a tiny little guy, tell me about suicide. And he explained what happened to his father. He said, the bad man inside my daddy's head killed my good daddy. So profound, so perfect, because we're finding undiagnosed traumatic brain injury is one of the leading risk factors. But our good grief camps help children transition from being a military dependent to being the living legacies of service and sacrifice, to learn coping skills. Many of our children bullied at school because they don't have, in most cases, it's a dad who they've lost. That's so unfair. We give them this community that lets them know that they're not the only one. They're not alone.
I know you're always innovating. You're always looking to grow. When you look ahead to the future, are there areas that you want to specialize in more, that there are other things you want to do or sectors you want to move into?
We're always pivoting and adjusting to the needs of our families. It was 15 years ago that we started seeing a trend in these cancers, rare cancers. If it was Guard and reservists who were going now to civilian oncologists, it was determined that these cancers were environmental, not genetic. The impact of the exposures to toxins such as the burn pits. It took 15 years to now have the PACT Act to open up the presumptions, to change the way that America understands what's happened to our military men and women overseas. I mentioned the research that we're doing on suicide, talking to the families, doing research and surveys about the risk factors they witnessed so that we can do better at preventing suicides. So we're always tracking trends. We're seeing the needs of our families, and then we're adjusting the programs. And we're aligning this with the research in the civilian population and what trends we're seeing there. Actually, it was when the federal government stepped in with benefits for those impacted as first responders at ground zero after 9/11 that then opened the pathway for the PACT Act to give benefits to our military who had experienced inhalation of toxins while deployed. And now they receive those benefits. So it's constantly evolving. We come right alongside where our military men and women are serving and sacrificing to better adjust how the families can be supported.
You are right now at I believe, a conference center. You have a major event happening. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's extraordinary. This is our 31st annual National Military Survivor Seminar and Good Grief Camp. And we have thousands of surviving family members who are pouring into Arlington, Virginia to attend workshops, to participate in ceremonies, to sit in sharing groups, to honor their loved one, to find out that they are not alone, to come together as this family of the living legacies of service and sacrifice. It is absolutely transformative. For the kids, for the adults, they come in on today actually, and then throughout the weekend, but just with tremendous anxiety, feeling isolating, feeling misunderstood or not understood at all. And when they leave at the end of the weekend, they found that they are part of this beautiful community, that they brought their loved one forward now that they've said that name and told those stories, and they leave feeling, I hope, a lot lighter. And
I'm certain they will. For anyone listening at the moment, how can they get involved? How can they help?
Well, TAPS is a nonprofit organization. It is a charity. We're not funded by the government at all, and that's purposeful. It allows us great flexibility to support all those grieving a loss, regardless of how or when the death occurred. But it honors a life that included service to this country. So please visit taps.org. If you know someone, most importantly, who is grieving a loss, please let us know. Let them know that they are not alone. I always say, it's hard for families to make that call. Sometimes it's easier if we have that permission to then reach out just quietly, and we'll keep reaching out. We have a quarterly magazine that is wonderful. Families can sign up for everything that we do. It's all on our website. We've got great resources, particularly for suicide loss at taps.org/suicide. We have events happening all over America. So this Memorial Day, as you enjoy the barbecues and the beach trips and the big sales, remember the lives of the fallen and the sacrifices made so that we can enjoy all of those activities on this weekend. Remember the lives lived in service and the sacrifices made, and say the name of a fallen hero this weekend as you remember.
Well, what a perfect way to end. And you're absolutely right. All the freedom we have today, everything we have is because of those people who fought, sacrificed themselves, in the name of the country and the community. So this is a weekend we must all remember them. And you're right. Say a name. Always say a name and don't forget them. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for all the work that you do. I know there are thousands and thousands of families who would say thank you to you as well. So I really appreciate your time. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks for listening to Searching for Heroes. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcasts Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts. And Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.